What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, December 23rd, 2016. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and Sunday is Christmas Day. This is our last show before Christmas. And a reminder that we are taking a holiday at RBN on Monday, so it'll be a repeat show. We'll be back live on Tuesday. Claire will be joining us in our third hour today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I imagine it's a light audience today. The numbers over at the website are down. People are already out there traveling, trying to get with family for Christmas. And if you are headed for the airports, you might want to be calling ahead or using your little smartphone travel app to make sure your flights are on time or that they're still going on. There are major disruptions going on. There's a heavy storm all over the coast of California, and Los Angeles International is just jammed up. They've had 600 delayed and canceled flights. The winds are so severe they can't get the planes in, and if they can't get the planes in, they can't send them on out. And so there's like huge numbers of people, thousands just hanging out at the airport, waiting to see if they can get an airplane, and they're expecting it to continue into tomorrow. Also, a lot of the destination airports are snowed in as well, and they're dealing with all of that. So if you are traveling this weekend, please exercise extra care. Now, for all of you concerned about John in Barbados, and I know there's a lot of you out there because I got a flood of email about it, I got an email from John's daughter, Selena, and basically the story is that John came down with a severe, very sudden lung infection. It built up a lot of fluid in his lungs, and due to the diminished lung capacity and lowered oxygen level in his blood, apparently he suffered a heart attack. This was all on Wednesday morning. He's in the hospital in a medically induced coma, and the doctors are not going to bring him out of the coma until his lungs have cleared up and his oxygen saturation levels increase. So they're saying it's a wait-and-see situation, and of course we all hope for the best. We all want John to come back on and verbally chastise me from time to time, as he so fond of doing. But that's the latest news we have on that. Okay, now then, watching our political circus, the Democrats, having run out of somebody to blame for Hillary's defeat, are starting to turn on each other now. They couldn't blame the Russians. They couldn't blame the deplorables. They couldn't blame the independent media. They're not willing to deal with the fact that Hillary herself and her long history of crimes and corruptions with her husband, Bill, was the problem. They won't go near that. So now they're actually turning on each other, pointing fingers at each other, and it got to the point where outgoing Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid just called all Democrats worthless because they weren't able to force Hillary Clinton onto the rest of us. Now then, Project Veritas is out with another video, and this is a good one. It turns out the rules in states are that during the vote count and during the recounts, there have to be judges there from both parties. There must be Republican judges and Democratic judges. And what this video reveals is that up in Chicago, there were Democrats going on in and claiming to be Republicans and getting those Republican judge jobs. So the reality was during the counting, there was nothing but Democrats in that room overseeing the counting. There were no real Republicans. They were all phonies. Apparently, there is no check of credentials. These Democrats could just walk on up and say, I'm a Republican, I want to be a judge. And they were in. And it's another strong indicator that fraud was going on. And, of course, the U.S. is still out there screaming, Russia interfered with our elections, this means war, so forth and so on. And it is the height of hypocrisy. Because according to a database put together by political scientist Dov Levin of Carnegie Mellon University, the United States has interfered in foreign presidential elections 81 times from the end of World War II to 2000. We don't even have the last 16 years on the data yet. 81 times. And so it is the height of hypocrisy for the U.S. government to get on their high horse and say, Russia interfered with our elections, how dare they do that? And again, there's no actual evidence Russia had anything to do with it. They didn't hack the DNC emails. Julian Assange has confirmed it was an internal leak. The former ambassador to the UK has confirmed it's an internal leak. Everybody who's in a position to know is saying this was an internal leak, possibly coming from Seth Rich or one of those other Democrat insiders who died mysteriously in the last weeks of the campaign season here. Now, we're getting a report that politicians are starting to come forward, and they've got a petition that's signed, admittedly mostly by Republicans, but they got a few Democrats on there as well. And the petition is to Donald Trump demanding the continuance of all criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's deals. And the petition is saying, point blank, politicians who have violated the law should be punished. And they're absolutely right. Nobody is supposed to be above the law. And we need to see this happen, not out of revenge, not out of vindictiveness, but to help rebuild our credibility around the world. Everybody knows what the Clintons were up to. The United States has to be seen to hold these people to account to start to win back the respect of other nations that was destroyed by the shameless behavior of the liberals this last election year. And we need to hold these people to account and send them to prison to send a message to young aspiring politicians, this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Because if we treat politicians like Wall Street, no matter what they do, they get off scot-free, then they're going to keep on doing what they're doing. Fraud, rigging, who knows what all else. It is very important to the nation that the Clintons be investigated and prosecuted for their crimes. Now, interestingly enough, there was a story that came on out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain reassuring us all that all is well with Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin, and they apparently had a 5-hour meeting at Hillary's New York office, and they got a photo of them coming out together, and Hillary looked really, really bad. The question I have is, what were they talking about for 5 whole hours? And my supposition would be they're probably worried about what's on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and we're hearing reports that it may, in fact, go beyond simply State Department emails into actual evidence of other, even more serious crimes. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network here. And we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dustin, are you there?
Hello, Mike?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And I wanted to say before I want to talk about Russia and Syria that I hope John gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And John from Barbados is like, it makes my day when I hear him on there. And I hope Hillary Clinton gets worse.
Yeah. No, I want her perfectly healthy and living a very, very long life, either in prison or as poor people. Because that's the best punishment for a money junkie, is you take their money away and you make them live like ordinary poor people.
And she's looking really bad lately.
Yeah, she is. She is.
One of the cast of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, it is getting that close.
Hey, Mike, on Syria, I want everybody to look at the video of all those people celebrating. And there's on Press TV, if you go on Press TV on YouTube, there's a video of a guy who was saying it's what's all about, and Israel, the pipelines, there's underground reserves there, and people need to watch that video. This guy, I was from Veterans Today, the gentleman.
Yeah, it's all about it's about the oil, it's about the petrodollar, and it does look like the U.S. has indeed been handed their hat in Syria, but they're still going to behave like spoiled children, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit further in the show.
And I just want to say to Donald Trump and Putin with the letter that Putin sent.
Yes.
See, this is how you get along, but like you said, it ain't over yet. because there's going to be monkey wrenches being thrown all over the place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to get nasty mail from the monkeys now on this one. All right, Dustin, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Lucas in Minnesota. Aloha, Lucas. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi. I was wondering, you know, about the epicite gene that's in the corn.
Yes.
I had a thought, like, you know, that could affect us human beings, not being able to reproduce.
Yes, that's the whole reason for concern.
Could that actually happen to other species, not just us, but the whole, you know, other species in the wild?
You know, I don't know enough about how this gene operates. I do know that it was designed to basically render any human eating this corn incapable of reproduction, but the possibility of crossover is a very real concern.
Yeah, it's like probably the biggest threat that humankind has faced.
You know, I mean, whoever designed this obviously intended it as part of a covert population reduction, and but if it in fact has the same effect on like the livestock that are being fed this corn, then all of a sudden your livestock is going to start dying off. This thing could spiral out of control just completely. And the concern here is we have seen in so many other areas of technology how this stuff is just thrown together and rushed to market to maximize profitability. The degree of recklessness and carelessness with what is, in my opinion, the most dangerous technology we've ever played with, it is very, very alarming.
Yeah, and like the pollen that's being spread across land into other species of corn.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that Monsanto's idea that a 10-yard buffer zone is going to protect you is ridiculous. When they were starting to collect heritage seeds for the seed banks they've got up there above the Arctic Circle, and they went way up in the mountains of Mexico to take samples of the native maize, the original corn as it was grown by the Aztecs and the Incans, and they discovered it had already been contaminated by artificial genes from other species of corn. So the stuff is just everywhere. Pollen never sleeps.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just wanted to talk about that. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Merry Christmas. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the political news. Remember Danny Williams? Danny Williams is a young man who claims that Bill Clinton is his father. And certainly if you compare photos of what they look like as young boys, the resemblance is striking. Now, Bill Clinton claimed there was a DNA test that exonerated him, but Danny Williams and his lawyers are saying the DNA test is questionable, may have been rigged, and they're moving forward with this paternity lawsuit, and apparently they are going to try and get DNA samples from Monica Lewinsky's stained blue dress. Apparently she kept it as a souvenir. It's never been cleaned. So that may be coming back to haunt Bill Clinton as well. Now then, the liberal whiners and crybabies are still out there, and I wish these people would step back, take a deep breath, and look in a mirror at the image they're projecting out to the world, how the rest of the world is going to see them behaving, see them when they behave like this. And so we're looking at this story that came out of Breitbart, where apparently there was a video done of Ivanka Trump in her home, and there's artwork on the walls. And apparently the artists who made the artwork have formed together the Halt Action Group. And they've got an Instagram campaign out there demanding that Ivanka Trump remove their artwork from her home. They don't want to be associated with her. How dare she have the artwork up there? Now, again, it shows just how the liberal crybabies never stop. However, I am sure that Ivanka will be glad to take down the artwork and send it back as soon as the refund checks arrive. And there is the hypocrisy. These artists certainly didn't mind selling that artwork in the first place and taking those paychecks, did they? And again, they need to really evaluate the public image they're creating for liberals when they behave like this, because it's not a very positive one. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, apparently the entertainment industry is already starting to blacklist all of the entertainers who are planning on performing at the Trump inauguration. I mean, after the headache I have been to the establishment ever since my blacklisting 22, 23 years ago, you'd think they'd be a little bit more cautious about having more of us out here willing to dedicate our lives to going after them. But they're behaving like children. It is amazing. It's almost like they think it's their divine right to be childish. Now then, getting on to Kellyanne Conway, there's an article that came on out here and said Kellyanne Conway is everything the leftists hate, or the liberals. She's smart, hardworking, beautiful, mother of 4, strong. She's not under multiple FBI investigations. And we were talking about the other day with Ivanka Trump. And the reason is the liberals have courted the vagina vote by putting out this story that women are oppressed, that if they are not successful, it's not their fault, because, who wouldn't hire somebody with an art history degree to be executive at an automotive manufacturing plant? And they've been selling that idea, that victimology, that, women would be ruling the world if it weren't for those evil white men. And so when somebody like an Ivanka Trump or a Kellyanne Conway comes along, it absolutely destroys that mythology. And that's why the liberals for all this talk about wanting to empower women and improve women, they don't actually want to see any women in positions of success because it undermines their mythology on which their entire political system is built. Same thing with courting the black vote. Oh, you're all oppressed. You're all being held down by Whitey and all the rest of that stuff. And when you see black people who are successful by their own hard work and smarts, not through quota systems, not through affirmative action, they don't like that. It undermines that myth that they're using to get support and to get votes here. Now, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, is saying something that I think most of us can agree with here. The left-wingers are living in a delusional world. And again, that is an aspect of Hillary Clinton having organized her campaign and her support as a personality cult. They all worshipped her. They all believed. They're all caught up in this idea that anything they do is for the betterment of planet Earth and humankind, and therefore anything they do is perfectly acceptable behavior. And they are very much delusional if they thought that staging riots against Trump in the cities that voted for Hillary was going to change anything. Now, getting on over to that horrible tragedy in Berlin, which is having repercussions all over. The Berlin Christmas market, I understand, is now reopened with concrete barriers and heavy security, added security at the Christmas fairs all over the rest of Europe, which I think is going to put a chill on the festive spirit. We certainly didn't have people with guns around that one that I experienced in Munich. But apparently they finally caught up with Anis Amri, this Tunisian gentleman, who is believed to be behind the Christmas market in Berlin because he left his permit in the car. No, wait, he didn't leave his permit. We found his fingerprints. Trust us on us. We wouldn't lie to you. We're the government. But he's been killed in a shootout in Milan, Italy. And that's very convenient for whoever was really behind all of this, because now the lines of evidence have been totally severed. That just feels so false flag to me, and we may see more of it. There's been an attempted hijacking earlier today. The globalists, the warmongers, maybe getting ready to do something or many somethings on Christmas Day to try and whip us up back into a war fever. That's going to work, and they're going to hurt and kill a lot of people in the process. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to go to the phones. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I wanted to wish you and Claire a very Merry Christmas.
Well, Melikalikimaka to you as well.
Thank you. And I hope you don't have any work to do during the break on Claire's harps. Hope you can relax.
Well, the harp is pretty much done, but of course there are two church services tomorrow evening that I'm a roadie for, as well as having been drafted as a baritone. So.
Yeah. Oh, if you had noticed, Trump recently announced, I think his name is Sean Spicer, as his press secretary.
Okay.
Yeah. In an ideal world, you would have that job. Now, that would be entertaining to see you go head-to-head with these corporate prostitutes and correspondents on a daily basis.
Well, it would be fun to imagine, but I'm sure Donald Trump understands that I would be the worst possible press secretary because the first time he told me to lie to the press, I would quit.
Yeah, well, if you did have that job, that would be a reason to watch C-SPAN.
I still want the head of NASA. I want to be head of NASA.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
did you hear about the U.S.'s involvement? It seems like they're looking into the National Front Party's $30 million loan from a Russian bank. Like, what is it the business of the U.S. on this matter?
Well, unfortunately, over the last couple of decades, even longer than that, the U.S. has taken the attitude that they are the world's policemen and peacekeepers, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we were the only remaining superpower. Therefore, by default, we were supposed to oversee the world. It's actually a thin cover for the U.S. imperial agenda of controlling all other countries, bringing them in as puppet-ruled provinces to support the empire. And over the time, they've developed this little bit of arrogance and kind of an automatic response that anything that happens in any country, anywhere on planet Earth, is the business of the United States government.
Right. That I agree with, and it seems like perhaps they're worried as well that Le Pen will win the presidency.
A lot of people, the New World Order people, are definitely afraid of that because it's signaling that this European Union is coming apart. They've got the Brexit. Theresa May has now said Parliament will not have a vote, that Brexit will occur based solely on the vote of the British people. We're seeing Italy's banks are in trouble. Spain's banks are in trouble. The whole experiment is falling apart, and a big reason for that. There's two actual reasons. The first one is the European Union was built with a built-in self-destruct mechanism called that European Central Bank, which is why all those European nations are hideously in debt that they cannot pay, because that's the end result of what happens when your nation is enslaved to a private central bank that issues all the public currency as a loan at interest. The second issue was this rush to try and blur the ethnic identity of the Europeans by flooding it with all of these refugees, and that's been a horrible flashback on that as well. So I think the EU is probably not going to survive this next year, and certainly Donald Trump is not on board with the globalists. The backlash to the New World Order is a rise of very strong nationalistic fever in countries around the world, and it's rather amazing to continue to see the corporate media and all of these New World Order people out there talking like a desire for the best for your own country is somehow a wrong thing or a bad thing or it's a dirty word now. And I agree with Donald Trump. We've got problems in this country that have to be dealt with before we dare presume to tell any other country on earth how to run their own internal affairs.
Well, I'm beginning to think that NATO's real mission is to keep these European countries in check, to not allow them to pivot east.
Well, NATO has definitely become basically a conquering, invading army, and there are a lot of NATO member nations that are now talking about leaving. And probably the only reason they don't is out of fear that NATO might just turn and invade them and drag them back in. Anyway, let's...
just a quick question.
Can you hold? Can you hold? I'm going to take you through the commercial break,
Thank you.
and then we'll come back for your question. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Bob in Las Vegas, and you said you had a question you wanted to ask me.
Yeah, Mike, for the life of me, I cannot understand these millennials. Most of them they support Hillary, the Democrats, or Bernie. Many of them are forced to live with their parents, to live at their parents' home, perhaps their old room or in the basement. What do you attribute this support? Because they're neglecting their own economic prospects. I mean, Donald Trump is trying to improve the economy, improve their prospects. I mean, what do you attribute this to? The indoctrination of the schools, and that is so powerful it makes them ignore their own economic prospects. I mean,
well, that's part of it. I mean, that's part of it. If you look at the reality that most families, both adults have to be working, then you find out that TV media and school, the kids are much more involved with that than with their own biological parents. And by the way, that's also part of the liberal agenda, going all the way back to Hillary Clinton's "It Takes a Village." But remember what I said about how Hillary and the liberals were courting women by saying, your sad lot in life is not your own fault. It's this oppressor who's around you, and if you support us, we'll deal with the oppressor. They played that same game with the millennials. This idea that there are jobs out there, you're being kept from it because of this or that group. Mostly the white people. I mean, we've been seeing it's open season on white people. You would have the good jobs if it wasn't for those white, angry, heterosexual males and so forth. And but it is wearing off here. And I've noticed something very, very strange here. Here in Hawaii, which is a blue state, and we are told went for Hillary Clinton, except we had one of the faithless electors here. One of our four dug their heels in and refused to vote for her. But I've noticed ever since the election was over, when I wear out my Hillary for Prison T-shirt, I'm getting a lot more response now than I did before the election. It's almost like, people were kind of like agreeing but didn't dare say anything. And now that Hillary Clinton has lost, they're a lot more open about coming up and saying, "I love the shirt." And I'm finding that there really were a lot more Trump supporters here than maybe the corporate media wanted us to know. I know that we had huge Trump sign-waving groups over at the state capitol down here on Mauna Lua. I only ever saw one Hillary sign waver, and she was so angry at what was going on, she was literally stepping into the street and slapping people's windshields with her Hillary sign. And so I'm beginning to wonder just how much election fraud was taking place out here as well. And again, given how much election fraud has already been uncovered, and given how much bias and spin there was on the corporate media to support Hillary, I'm not sure all that many millennials really did support Hillary Clinton, or all that many women, or all that many blacks or Hispanics. Hillary's entire election almost success, could have been as much an illusion as anything else. It was just all crafted, and they bet the farm on it, and they lost. Anyway, listen, Bob, I need to let you go. I got an important phone call I need to get to.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, fine here. And we're going to switch over to Selena. And Selena, thank you for calling into the show here. What's the latest about John?
I probably should have said not to do this online. Oh. He passed away 3 hours ago.
Okay. Well, wow, that's... our hearts go out to you and your family, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of outpouring of sympathy and support. John just had a lot of fans around the world, certainly a lot on my radio show and website. He was very well-liked and well-respected. And Selena, you've got my email address. If there's anything that we can do, if you could send me an address that I could send some flowers to, I would really appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. I must hate to say Merry Christmas because of the juxtaposition there. Well, that is very sad news indeed. And I am going to miss him. And I'm sure pretty much everybody else out there is going to as well. All righty, let's move on here. Now, getting on back to the crybaby liberals here, I don't think they realize how childish they're looking here. Politico is now reporting there's a Democratic concert promoter is putting together a huge We the People concert in Miami that is going to be filled with all these liberal Democrat celebrities at the exact same time as Donald Trump's inauguration to try and steal the spotlight from him, to upstage him. And I certainly have no intention of tuning in, and I would suggest that you don't as well. In fact, I hope it's a complete, utter economic disaster. But again, it is an indicator of how these liberals are just behaving like children. They want what they want. They don't care what anybody else's concerns are. If they can't have what they want, they riot. They scream. They demand the rules be changed to get the outcome they want. They're planning disruptions in Washington, D.C., and now they're trying to basically steal Donald Trump's thunder by having a star-studded concert at the exact same time as the inauguration. And I don't know about you, I absolutely am going to be watching the inauguration. Because and I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening to this show, worked very hard this last year to defeat Hillary Clinton. That inauguration is our prize, our trophy, our commemoration. And I am certainly not going to miss that for a bunch of crybaby celebrities down in Miami going, oh, we should have... Maybe they're going to have Hillary show up on the stage and act like, well, this is what my inauguration would have been like if you'd been smart enough to vote for me. Who knows what's going on? It really is ridiculous. I'm starting to actually feel a sense of shame that I used to work in that Hollywood environment, looking at how they're behaving today, not to mention how they treated me. But it is amazing here. And I got to be honest, though. Okay, to be fair, when you're working in Hollywood, you're going to meet two kinds of people. You're going to meet some absolute saints who worked very hard to do what they do and do it very well, and they're committed to doing good work. And on the other side, you're going to meet these egotistical, self-absorbed sharks. And for some reason, there's very little in the middle there. It's all saints and sinners. It's very polarized that way. And I met plenty of both kinds. Alrighty, so getting on out here for the independent media and its future. The Obama administration is pushing for global social media surveillance. Really? I thought that's what the NSA was already doing. Well, that's not exactly what Obama is talking about. What Obama is talking about is surveilling social media in order to control and censor it. And we have not just the U.S. government, but governments around the world, despotic governments around the world, dictatorships, tyrannical governments all over the world, and the corporate media are all trying to work with Facebook to censor any kind of speech critical of the government or calling into question any of the reporting of the corporate media. And this is going to fall flat on its face for a very simple reason. Look at the audience numbers for CNN as just one example. Because everybody knows it's a filtered pro-government propaganda channel. And what's going to happen to Facebook when they turn it into a filtered pro-government propaganda channel? People are going to leave it. They're going to go to the new startup social medias, Scene Life, Gab, Diaspora, and they're taking off on the promise of censorship-free communication. And Facebook is going to have a loss of audience, and coupled with the recent scandals about all these mistakes that resulted in overbilling their advertisers, I think Facebook might actually vanish. The people are awake now. They know there is a controlled, filtered media trying to lie them into more wars, and they know there's an alternative out there. And just like in the former Soviet Union, when the samizdat became available, everybody went there. They stopped reading Pravda. They stopped reading Izvestia. They stopped watching the Soviet TV news because they knew it was all garbage. And they went where they thought they could find the facts about what was going on. The same thing is happening here, and they can't stop it. Now, Edward Snowden is out there saying that, yes, there is fake news, most of it coming from the government and the corporate media. And the solution is not censorship, but critical thinking. Same thing I was saying. Trust yourself to be smart enough to see through the lies. Just analyze it. Think about it. Look for what should be there and isn't. We've given you all the rules to help you figure out what is a true story and what is likely a piece of propaganda. And so Snowden's saying the same thing. We need to encourage people everywhere, especially young people, to become critical thinkers. It's certainly not being taught by Common Core. One of the reasons our millennials are considered virtually useless in the modern global marketplace is their inability to think for themselves, their inability to analyze, their inability to solve problems. They're not taught how to think or how to teach themselves. They're taught to believe. Believe in human caused global warming. Believe liberals want the best for the world. Believe our elections are honest. Believe the media will always tell you the truth. Believe the independent media are a bunch of tinfoil hat-wearing kook wingnut wackos. It's not education, it's indoctrination. So you as parents, for however much time you have spending with your children, you need to encourage them to learn the skills of analysis and solving problems. And it doesn't have to be something difficult. Go to the toy store and start getting, like puzzles, the little puzzles. And you give the kid a puzzle and say, when you solve it, you get $20. Just that little thing. They start thinking about how to make things work out. And they start learning those skills the school will not teach them. It's one of the reasons I buy little puzzles for all the kids in the neighborhood. I don't give them $20. I don't have it to give. But they get hooked and they start tinkering with things. I want another one. I want another one. They're ready to learn it. They're hungry to learn how to think, how to analyze, how to solve problems. You just have to give them that enrichment experience. Now, Vladimir Putin is out there with an observation we all agree with. The defeated Democrats' blame game is not very dignified. Actually, it's not dignified at all. They are behaving like a bunch of whiny crybabies rolling around on the ground, kicking and screaming, saying, change the rules so we win. Or at least give me a participation trophy. Actually, that's what that concert in Miami is. It's going to be Hillary Clinton's participation trophy. Now, the best way to deal with all this nonsense, as I said before, is humor, and there is a new trending hashtag on Twitter, Russians did it, into which is pouring all of these humorous illustrations and jokes about how everything is Russia's fault. And some of them are very funny, and that's the best way to deal with it. Make a joke out of it. We know it's certainly a joke from the government's side. All we have to do is start laughing at them over it. Russia made me drink all that vodka, officer. It's really ridiculous here. Now, turning to the war zones. Syria has now officially declared victory in Aleppo. They are in full control of the city. And apparently the party is on. Syria is now saying that the conditions exist for talks on a full and complete ceasefire in Syria. This is the United States government's biggest military defeat since Vietnam, and this only being December 23rd. This one goes on Obama's scorecard, which I know he didn't want to see happen. And, of course, from the other side, they're acting like this is a defeat. It's a disaster. It's a great loss for the militants fighting to topple Assad, which was, of course, the agenda all along, another regime change. And with the loss of Syria, this dollarification of the entire Middle East is in serious, serious trouble. If they don't have Syria, going into Iran gets very problematic, because we already know Russia will do in Iran what they did in Syria. They will bomb the U.S.-backed rebels, terrorists, into the dust here. Families are now returning to their homes in Masakan Hanano in Aleppo, And the parties are on, despite attempts by disruptors to plant bombs and make it look like there's still humanitarian suffering. And the U.S. government proving once again that it is, in fact, a bunch of spoiled brats who want their petty revenge. The U.S. has now imposed sanctions against the Syrian central bank chief and members of Syria's cabinet. We're going to express our displeasure that you've escaped from our grasp. Now, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who, if the Democrats are looking for a rising star to take into 2020, Tulsi's it. And she's out there saying, end these illegal, counterproductive, regime change wars, and she is absolutely right. Nobody is fooled anymore about humanitarian war, or we have to go in and save these people from an evil tyrant, or we're really not bombing this country, we're only after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Everybody knows it's a fake. And these regime change wars have been a big part of America's loss of prestige around the world. They're counterproductive. We've been living in a wartime economy for more than 10 years. Our nation is showing it in the infrastructure and the economic hardship we're all having to suffer. And in the long run, it's not going to work out. They don't want to admit defeat, unfortunately. But Tulsi's bang spot on there here. Now, obviously, when things start to fall apart for those who are doing nefarious things, the wet work starts on out. We've seen the Russian ambassador assassinated. That was a political thing. A member of the Russian government murdered in his own home in Moscow. The latest one is Yves Chandelon, the chief auditor of NATO. And he was found dead in the city of Anden in the Belgian Ardennes. Now, the official story is he committed suicide. His family is saying that is complete nonsense. The body was found way out of position. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there is just a ton of email pouring on in with condolences to the family of John from Barbados. And if you're just now tuning in, we received word that he did pass away earlier today. So we're all going to miss him horribly. And but the emails are coming on in. So Selena, if you're still listening, I mean, there's a huge outpouring of sympathy and support, and deservedly so. All right. Now let's get on back to the story I was talking about before the break. Yves Chandelon was the chief auditor of NATO. He was found dead in the city of Anden in the Belgian Ardennes region. The official story is he committed suicide. His family is saying that is complete nonsense. The body was found 140 kilometers away from his work and 100 kilometers away from where he lived. Nobody can even come up with an explanation why he would have been in that location. Now, Chandelon had 3 registered weapons that he owned, but the gun found near the body was unregistered and untraceable. And Chandelon was dealing in particular with issues on countering funding of terrorism. And apparently he had told friends and family that he was receiving very strange phone calls shortly before his death. So Chandelon appears to have discovered a terrorism funding pipeline that impinged on somebody's agenda, possibly a nation state here. Now, over in Okinawa, the United States has been at odds with the people of Okinawa, and less so the government itself, over this ongoing problem of U.S. forces stationed there, behaving badly with the indigenous people, up to and including, unfortunately, several rape incidents. And there's been a growing movement among the people of Okinawa to demand the United States leave, because, after all, World War II is over, and there really isn't a reason for the United States to have a military base on Okinawa, at least from the point of view of the Okinawan people. Now, we know that that base in Okinawa is a hub from which surveillance flights are flown all over Asia, across Russia, and the U.S. wants to hang on to it. So as a token of appeasement, the United States is now returning 9,000 acres of land to the Japanese government, just land that the U.S. has had in case of future development, and they're saying, well, we're not really going to use it. Here's your 9,000 acres, which is a big chunk of land, but I don't think it's really going to assuage the Okinawan people, who basically want Okinawa back under total Okinawan control. And I think we're going to see this around the world. The United States has over 700 foreign military bases in countries that really do not want them there. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more pressure for these bases to be closed down. And I agree. Look at how expensive it is to maintain them. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're getting word now that the current U.S. plan is to deploy 4,000 troops to the Russian border next month, coinciding with the deployment of 300,000 NATO troops that have been on high alert since last month, getting ready for whatever's going on. But again, incoming President Donald Trump has signaled that he does not want to go along with any more wars with Russia and China or foreign interventions. And so he's going to pull the plug on that. So these 4,000 troops may get a nice little European vacation and come right on home. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dave in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I've been reading on the Internet about Roseanne Barr's ex-husband wanting to come out and say that he was sent a private video of Donald Trump using all kinds of horrific language and using the N-word and so much worse than anything that came out before. And I was just going to ask you if you heard anything about that.
No, and I really don't care. I'm not paying attention. Donald Trump is the president, and what he did in his youth is irrelevant at this point. What he does from this point forward is what matters to all Americans.
You're correct. They're trying to say this was done on The Apprentice.
Well, let me share something with you. When you're working on production for TV shows or movies or commercials, commercials are the worst in terms of stress. TV series next, and feature films are a little bit more relaxed. People lose their temper, and they just say things that they later regret, and that's a reality. I've lost it a couple of times on a stage myself and said things that I'm very happy nobody had a camera running on me. And that's just how people respond to that pressure. I'm sorry, what?
Right. They said, Tom Arnold said this was done in jest. He said he called his son a retard, said the N-word a lot, different things like that. And it was sent out anonymously, well, to 4 or 5 people that were on the set. And I don't know if they was going to try to blackmail Donald Trump with this or what. But Hillary Clinton, the night before the election, had somebody call Tom Arnold and say, look, for the sake of the nation, I'd really appreciate if you check it out. For the sake of the nation, you got to come forward with this information. And supposedly Tom Arnold says, and Hillary was sitting right next to the person, and supposedly Tom Arnold said, no, I'm not going to do it. But now he's out saying, apparently because Trump's team contacted him, this is what he said, and basically threatened him that now he's going to come out with the information and he's going to just let it all out. So
okay, well, my response to that is big deal. If Trump was just joking around, and again, I joke around too, it's irrelevant. It really is. This is Tom Arnold's desperate grasp for media attention to revive a career that has evaporated. And the same thing with Roseanne Barr. Yeah, we're seeing all these liberal has-beens trying to ride Hillary's coattail to fame. Look at that video they came out with when they were trying to convince the electors to go faithless. All these former celebrities and actors who don't have a current gig are out there saying, "Oh, we got to do this, we got to do that." Now they're all going to be going on down to Miami. And try and do it once more time. And they're making themselves irrelevant. I don't care what Tom Arnold says or has. And I don't care what Donald Trump said during a production of a TV show. What Donald Trump does from January 20th of next year forward is what impacts all Americans. And let's be honest here. I am sure that every single one of you listening to this show at some point in your life, either joking around or under extreme stress and pressure, have probably said things that you really wish you hadn't done. We all have moments like that, okay? And that's a reality. I've got moments like that. So that's just the reality, okay?
Good deal, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, Vladimir Putin has come out with an interesting observation. He's looking at what's going on in the European Union. He's looking at how what supposedly was supposed to simply be a free trade zone has mutated into this absolute tyranny by the European Union Council over Europe. Even the European Parliament has absolutely no power. They can debate, they can recommend, but the laws are created by that unelected, unaccountable European Union Commission. And Putin is basically saying that because of this, the European Union has become a worse dictatorship than the Soviet Union was. The European Union Commission is the new Politburo. And we know that life under the Soviet Union was very miserable for the Soviet citizens, and we are seeing with our own eyes how life under the European Union Commission has been terrible for ordinary Europeans between the crushing economic predations of the European Central Bank and this refugee nonsense. Europe is under attack by the European Union Commission. The economy is under attack, their culture is under attack, their ethnic identity and heritage is under attack. It's terrible. Anyway, we're going to take a break and do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And the United Nations at first said they were going to postpone this vote on the Israeli settlements possibly indefinitely. That didn't sit well with people. They had the vote today. The Security Council voted to condemn the Israeli settlements, and here's where it gets amazing. The United States abstained from the vote, but did not exercise their veto. And that means the motion passed. The United Nations Security Council has condemned Israel's illegal settlements on Palestinian land. And this is Barack Obama, his final little giving the finger to Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Donald Trump, of course, was on board with defeating this measure, and I think Donald Trump is still tainted with a worldview that came out of corporate media. But I think as he gets into more and more of his actual security briefings and he sees how Israel really works, I think he's going to change. And I've expressed this before, that being an outsider, and with most of his worldview shaped by the corporate media, even though he knows now the corporate media has been lying, most of what he thinks he knows about the world still came from that. Trump is, in many ways, as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter was. But it looks to me like he's learning fast. He's coming on board. He's got some good advisors, and he's apparently listening to them. And I think his position on Israel is going to change. Certainly coming out of Israel, especially from Uri Avneri's website, they do not like his choice for U.S. ambassador to Israel. Even though the ambassador is Jewish, they don't see him as sufficiently on board with Israel's point of view. So, again, we will decide after January 20th. Now, as you know, Donald Trump went on out and he questioned the high cost that Boeing was putting on the 2 new Air Force One jets. And Obama approved these replacements for Air Force One, even though the current airframes still have a lot of life left in them. But he approved these new ones. These were going to be Hillary Clinton's flying imperial palaces. And Boeing just had a huge price on them, something like $8 billion on the contract. And you can buy 2 of the actual jets themselves for less than $1 billion. And so Trump was saying, I'm going to cancel, and Boeing said, well, we can roll the price down a little bit, so that project may be going forward. Donald Trump has now turned his sights on the F-35, saying it is hugely expensive, and from what anybody can see, it is a piece of junk. And he's saying that he may pull the plug on the F-35 and instead go for Boeing to upgrade the F-18 Super Hornet. Just do some upgrades on that and build some more of that because they've already got the jigs and the assembly lines set up to produce that. Frankly, I think Putin's probably going to call up Donald Trump and say, we'll sell you some T-50s. They fly much higher than the F-35, much faster, much farther, and they're less than half as much money. Okay. Now then, turning to the economic news. Deutsche Bank has settled with the U.S. Department of Justice. They're going to pay a $3.1 billion with a B civil penalty because, again, the mortgage-backed securities. Finally, after all these years, these perpetrators of one of the biggest economic frauds in history are finally getting their wrist slap fines. Now, $3.1 billion is a lot of money. It's a little more than a wrist slap. And Deutsche Bank's attorneys had privately said that somewhere between $2 and $3 billion was probably what they were going to be forced to pay. Now, of course, what's Deutsche Bank going to do? Well, a huge amount of that settlement gets taken off their taxes. So you, the taxpayers, are going to wind up actually covering most of this, and then they get the rest of it back by increasing fees to their customers or simply launching another fraud to cover the costs of the previous fraud. Deutsche Bank has just this terrible reputation. But at this point, so does all of Wall Street. So do all the private central banks and the big hedge fund managers. They're constantly being caught in fraud. And it's reached a point where it seems like the real economy of the United States, people working, buying things, putting money into the economic system, having it circulate around, has already shut down. And the big banks and Wall Street are ticking along entirely on criminality because they can't figure out any other way to stay in business. And a big part of it are all these bailouts. Because when you take money away from the people of any nation and give it to the bankers to deal with the red ink on their ledgers, then the ordinary people don't have the money to engage in commerce or to buy things and engage in any of the activity banks used to actually make their livings from. It's a death trap. Once they go down that route, the system becomes locked up and paralyzed. Meantime, out here in the real world, the retail Mageddon, even in the middle of the holiday shopping season. American Apparel is getting ready to close 12 of their stores in Great Britain. The Limited is about to declare bankruptcy. They're going to close 240 stores. And they're basically saying that they have a huge amount of merchandise. Nobody is coming in to buy anything. They don't have the money, and nobody wants to put anything else on their credit cards because they're not sure they can pay it off. Unlike the government and Wall Street, who borrow money recklessly, and when they get into trouble, they stick the taxpayers with it. Ordinary citizens are actually showing far more fiscal restraint and responsibility than corporate leadership and the government itself. Now, forecasters are predicting that Kohl's, JCPenney, and Walmart will close the most stores of retailers next year in 2017. And talk about your Ebenezer Scrooge, General Motors, Boeing, GoPro, Xerox, Caterpillar, and the Limited are all planning layoffs to be announced between Christmas and New Year's. Merry Christmas. Now, Bitcoin has passed $830. For those who got in early, that's going to be very good. Spain has now banned all cash transactions over $1,000. If you're doing something that's over that, it must go through a bank, be recorded and reported. And of course, as we reported last week, the Italian bank Monte Paschi is going to be nationalized. This is effectively a third taxpayer-funded bailout of this bank. It's amazing. Basically, they're running Europe's financial system like somebody who's looking at their credit card bills, and they're all maxed out, and they're all past due, and all they can think of doing is getting another credit card and putting that balance on there. That's effectively what they're doing. Because with the real economy locked up, there's no new money being brought in. Ordinary workers are not able to trade their labor for wages and salaries to pump that wealth back into the economy. They're just spreading it around, trying to keep the debt even on anybody so it doesn't pile up and sink anyone. But at some point, they're going to start running out of that liquidity. We already saw it in Italy. Italy was trying to get help from ECB, IMF, World Bank. They said no. Monte Paschi went back to their anchor investors. They said no. Putting more money into that bank, they might as well just flush it down the toilet. Because the bank can't make the money back to pay its way out of the debt. All it does to survive is just take more and more and more away from the taxpayer. The other big problem everybody is dealing with is the pension panic. We've been hearing about all of these pension funds all across the country, public sector workers, state-run pension funds, and they're all in trouble. And it all goes back to 2008 and the mortgage-backed security fraud, because Wall Street's pet ratings agencies, who are paid by the financial institutions, not by the customers, all gave AAA ratings to these mortgage bundles. Now, pension funds, retirement funds, by law, are only allowed to invest in AAA-rated securities because they represent retired people who don't have the luxury of youth to start over and rebuild their lives. And all these pension funds bought into these mortgage-backed securities. The fraud imploded. The pensions were defunded. And there's been a tremendous resistance by the managers of these pension funds and the government officials they work for to point the finger or blame at Wall Street. Instead, they're blaming the retirees for living too long and expecting too much. So, apparently there is a shocking rise in homeless children across Britain. What is not being said is how many of these homeless children are actually British, as opposed to some of these refugees who are coming across through the Channel Tunnel. Now, a little bit of good news. Over in Baltimore, there was this really horrible story, and we have unfortunately seen this in so many places across the United States of America, where individuals and institutions who are trying to help and feed the homeless and hungry are being penalized and fined by local governments who just want the homeless and hungry to go someplace else and stop standing somewhere where the tourists can see them, which has been an issue and an agenda here in Hawaii. And so over in Dundalk County, they were going to impose a $12,000 fine against a church who were trying to help the homeless people. And I guess in the spirit of Christmas, or just shamed by the public outcry, the fine has now been dropped. And we are at the point here where we need to stop thinking that hunger and homelessness is something that just needs to be hidden. That's not a solution. It never was. We need to get the American people back working, all of them, not just the mythic 5% unemployed, but all the 90-plus million Americans who've been out of work for weeks and months. We need to get them all back to work. And that's going to help bring some of these homeless and hungry back into the system. And they're going to need a little help getting back into the system. They need permanent addresses for a lot of the paperwork required by the government. But even without that, if ordinary people are working, they're going to reach out and help the homeless and hungry just out of their own pocket, not even through an organized charity, especially after so many organized charities have been exposed as a fraud anyway. But maybe for Christmas, you might want to think that contacting whatever local organization and doing a little something to ease the hunger and suffering of the American people. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones here. Mike in Brazil, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. First, I want to express my condolences to John from Barbados. When I heard you saying he passed away,
yes,
it came like a shock because only a few days ago he was on the phone. But anyway, I want to express my condolences to his family. I hope they're listening, and I hope they're going to pull through. But anyway, the reason I called is about Putin's remark about the European Union resembling or even being worse than USSR. If you remember, I don't know if you know, there is a video of Vladimir Bukovsky, who was I believe he was an ex-KGB guy. So he gave an interview back in 1996, and in effect he said that the European Union, its structure, it's copied from the Soviet model with a Politburo, a Supreme Council, and all that stuff. So Putin is right. The European Union, I think, is worse than the Soviet Union in many respects. And I tell you one thing, when the EU will come apart, and it will, they will hang the politicians on lampposts because people are so angry. I'm getting emails from I have friends in Germany and in Holland, and they said the situation there is intolerable. People are afraid to get out of their houses, go about their daily routines because they're being constantly attacked by migrants. So, what I wanted to say is that Putin is absolutely correct in what he said.
I think that's absolutely true here, especially we've been hearing all these stories about how the European Union Commission just arbitrarily imposes regulations. Some of them are petty and downright silly, just apparently because they can. Controls on various products, and it was supposed to be a free trade zone, and it's anything but. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And looking at Juncker, who never really seems to be totally sober when I see him on TV, it does seem like it's all gone to his head.
Yeah, and another thing is somebody made a remark about Angela Merkel, saying that she's insane. Oh, it was a cop. And now the guy is being indicted on charges of libel or something like that. And the truth of the fact is that she is insane. I mean, looking at the situation in Europe overall, women getting raped, people getting assaulted and beaten up in the streets, and this woman doesn't back off. I mean, she keeps pushing this open borders policy to the extremes, and people just had enough of it. And not only this, but it looks like the Schengen area in Europe is going to come under scrutiny because this guy traveled from Berlin all the way to Italy from where he originally came, going to Germany.
Yeah, and that was the amazing thing. This guy had been in prison in Italy for 4 years for an arson charge, and he was still allowed into Germany. And that really shows the ridiculousness of not having some reasonable border controls on these countries here. And, you know, Merkel's fully on board the New World Order, but she's starting to turn Germany back into a Nazi state. She's trying to start all these laws about how anybody with wrong opinions can be punished and thrown in jail. And I guess they're trying to make an example out of this police officer to say that, you know, you're not allowed to say bad things about our leader, no matter how true they might be. And this almost harkens back to Ernst Zundel's trial, where he was thrown in jail for questioning the Holocaust. And the judge literally said, I don't care if what you're saying is true, it is still illegal for you to say it. And that tells you...
His lawyer ended up in jail, too, for defending him.
Yes. I mean,
remember that one?
I remember that one.
The lawyer actually ended up in jail for doing her job. And another thing is, I don't know if you heard about this guy. He was a mayor in some city in southern France. And just because the guy made a remark such as, well, I look at the classrooms today in our schools, and 91% of the students there are all Muslims. And because of this, now he's being criminally indicted. What happened to the freedom of speech these people?
Oh, it's absolutely gone. All right.
Remember that term?
Okay, Mike, got to put you on hold. Got to take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Mike in Brazil, and you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Vladimir Bukovsky said in that interview. I think you can still find that video on YouTube. I have it saved. I saved it for myself. But anyway, he said that the European Union, basically, they define democracy as forcing people to vote and keep voting until they vote the way it is wanted. And this is their vision of democracy in Europe. And he was dead on. He was dead on right in what he said, because basically this is what it is. They keep asking people to vote over again, and you know, to achieve the desired political goal.
Well, just like they were trying to talk about having a second. They were talking about having a second Brexit referendum. And you know, the people pick up on this, you know, that, you know, vote until we get what we want isn't really democracy. It's a tyranny masquerading as a democracy. And mandatory voting is a hallmark of every dictatorship, because they understand that people realize it's a dictatorship, and they're not going to vote because they know their votes don't really matter, so they make it mandatory.
Yeah, and do you remember they used to have a term back in the 1970s? We're both baby boomers, so you might as well remember this. They used a term, they coined this term called prisoner of conscience. Yes. It was all over the Western media, the press in those days, and applying the term to Soviet dissidents like Andrei Zakharov, like Solzhenitsyn, and the rest of them. And they use that term all the time. Oh, they're prisoners of conscience because they don't agree with the political system, or they're labeled insane. Today, fast forward, it's exactly the same situation, except that they no longer use the term prisoners of conscience, because that's exactly what these people are. They believe in one thing, and the government comes down on them like a ton of bricks, and they jail them. This is basically repression unseen since the Soviet days. Yeah, and it's not just in Europe. We're seeing it here, where, you know, the independent media is currently under overt attack, but it's been under covert attack all along. And the corporate media is trying to dismiss everybody as, oh, they're crazy, they're kooks, you know, they're wackos. Anybody who doesn't believe what's in the corporate media is some kind of a nut job. And of course, today, anybody who doesn't believe what's in the corporate media is working for the Russian propaganda ministry or whatever it is they're saying here. I remember the physicist, Andrei Zakharov. He was, I think, twice, he won the Nobel Prize twice in physics. He was actually institutionalized in a psychiatric institution because he disagreed with Leonid Brezhnev. And then he was expelled from the country with no right of return. And basically we have reached that point where if one tactic does not work, they will apply the other tactic. And in this case would be forced, hospitalization in a psychiatric institution. So basically this is all I have to say. Sorry again, I need to express my condolences for poor John. You're right, he will be missed. Yes. And anyway, Mike, have a Merry, Merry Christmas, and to you and Claire, and take care. Hope we'll talk again next year. Yeah, I'm sure that we will. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And we've already seen in the United States that the corporate media has put out all these articles from respected names in the field of psychiatry that people who don't believe the official story are mentally ill. Too much exposure to the internet can lead to depression and mental illness. They even had, they came up with a psychological term to describe mistrust of the government as a mental illness, for which I'm sure they have a pill that they're getting ready to sell everybody on that.
All right, let's see. Moving on forward, sanity is starting to break out in the wake of the Trump election victory, and the pushback against PC is really starting to be felt. Over in Wisconsin, lawmakers are threatening to cut state support to the University of Wisconsin at Madison over a course that is being offered called The Problem of Whiteness. And State Representative Dave Murphy, in an interview with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, was saying, this doesn't strike me as a legitimate course of any kind of education. It's pushing a racist agenda against whites, and he's absolutely correct. I mean, can you imagine the uproar if a university offered courses called The Problem of Blackness, or The Problem of Hispanics, or The Problem of Being Jewish? Oh, boy, you would never hear the end of it. But for some reason in this country, it's open season on white people. And again, if you go over to WikiLeaks and you look for the definition of black power, it's a movement to get black people to take pride in their heritage and recognize their strength and their culture. If you go over and you look at brown power, oh, it's a movement to unite brown people and encourage them to take pride in their heritage and culture. And then you look for the definition of white power and they say, oh, it's a bunch of racists, white supremacists, KKKers, and all the rest of that stuff. Racism is wrong in any direction. And you don't cure racism by being racist in reverse. It just doesn't work that way. If you're out there screaming that whites are automatically, as a class of people, somehow bad or destructive of society, then you are a racist. Period. End of discussion. Too bad if you're offended by what I just said. Go play with your Play-Doh or something in your safe space. Now, somebody has launched a new website, and you probably ought to visit it, and you probably ought to bookmark it. It's called hatecrimehoaxes.com, and as the name suggests, it is a compilation of all of these hate crimes that you have seen reported in the corporate media to build sympathy for this or that group. Oh, the anti-Semites are on the march again, the white supremacists are on the march again, the Trump people are on the march again, and how many of them are exposed as hoaxes. And this website pulls them all together, and it is a huge, huge list of these things. And we've seen the corporate media. They'll be out there saying, oh, anti-Semites painted swastikas on the door of this dorm room of this student at Georgetown. And then when it's exposed as a hoax, they'll print the retraction, on page 87 underneath the obituaries. One of the problems we have with the American people right now, especially in terms of the print media, they'll read just the headline and think they know what's going on, which is why we see so many printed news stories where the headline is directly contradicted by what's in the body of the story. Because they understand, they need to report the honest facts, but most people are just going to skim the newspaper, read the headlines, and think they know what's going on, and they don't. It's a very dishonest way of doing things, but that's what the corporate media will do. Obama, in his final days in office, is attempting to ratify the United Nations Gun Control Treaty. He wants those guns, to end. And again, I mentioned this yesterday, this double standard. Every time there's a Muslim who commits an act of terror, we are told we should not condemn all Muslims for the actions of a crazy few. And yet when somebody with their brain melted on prescription antidepressants shoots up a movie theater, oh my goodness, all the gun owners are collectively guilty and all the gun dealers and gun manufacturers, they're all part of the problem. We have to take guns away from the law-abiding citizens. You can see the hypocrisy there. Now, I'm opposed to violence, but let us be very honest about something. The Second Amendment is not about target shooting. It's not about hunting deer. It's not about hunting ducks. It's about defending your home against criminals and an out-of-control, unconstitutional government. That's what it's there for. That Second Amendment is there to enforce the other 9 in that Bill of Rights. That's what it's really there for. And the interesting thing to remember, when the Second Amendment was written, they're talking about military arms. They're talking about a militia. And ordinary firearms, hunting weapons, varminting guns, they were such a necessary part of life. Nobody even entertained the notion of taking those away. They were indispensable, especially during the winter when you didn't have farm crops. You had to go on out and hunt meat. The Second Amendment is specifically about reserving to the American people military weapons to hold an out-of-control government in check. That's what it's there for. If the uniformed services have it, we are allowed to have it as well. Only dictators and tyrants fear an armed population. One of the things that made the United States credible and respected around the world was a government that trusted its people to own and use firearms. And now they're going back on that. Down in Missouri, talk about the school-to-prison pipeline to fund that prison industrial complex, all the prison factories, the slave labor. Just like Germany had in those camps. They were slave labor camps. Forget all the nonsense about, gassings and all the rest of it. They were factory camps, slave labor camps. The people in them were manufacturing war material for the Nazi armies. That's what they were there for. And we have the same thing in this country. People are sent to prison and turned into effectively slave labor. They get a few pennies for what they're doing. And they had the same thing in the Nazi camps. There was a camp script. You actually got paid, and you could spend that camp script in the camp store, the theater. They even had a bordello in many of these. So that's what these are. We're descending into that which we were told that we were supposed to hate so much in the middle of the last century. So down in Missouri, they've passed a new law that makes fighting by grade school students a felony, punishable by up to a 4-year sentence in prison. This goes into effect January 1st. If grade school students get into fights, and it happens all the time, they can go to jail for up to 4 years. I mean, that is just completely ridiculous. And this is clearly coming out of the liberal establishment, who actually believes that if they have this law, that they will, change what's in the brains of little kids so they won't get into fights. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Now, apparently, 4 bodies have been found on the property of retired Briarcliff Manor cop Nicholas Tartaglione. And apparently these bodies were missing men from a busted drug deal last April. And apparently this officer killed them and buried them on property he rented in Orange County. It's amazing. All right, we got a little bit of time left before the Lady Claire joins us. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. And again, if you are traveling for Christmas this weekend, you need to check your airline. Los Angeles International Airport is stormed in. A lot of flights, 600 flights canceled or delayed. Going to be more of that tomorrow. A lot of the reason, a lot of the destination airports in the northern part of the continental United States are snowed in. So check on your smartphone app or call, find out what's really going on before you head on out that door, because it's a mess out there. Now, over Lake Superior, they're starting to see the formation of this very intense icy fog, and it's signaling a massive lake effect blizzard for Minnesota, and it looks like it's going to hit on Christmas Day. And it's going to be bad. And Al Gore's going to be out there screaming, no, that's not snow, that's white lumpy rain. You will not see the snow. You will not see the ice. You will pay carbon taxes. Woo! It's ridiculous here. Up in Surgut in Siberia, the temperature has dropped to minus 62 degrees centigrade. It's a 10-year record low temperature. Now, thankfully, the people in this town, in Ugra, they're acclimated to the cold weather. So they're out there having fun, taking pictures and posting them on social media. But that is very extreme weather. But that is not stopping our corporate media, the real news, in this case, the Washington Post, reporting that the Arctic ice cap is melting and it's lost 57,000 square miles of ice have melted over the past 24 hours because you humans are using carbon without paying a tax on it. And they can say that knowing that very few of us have the means to actually go up to the Arctic and check for ourselves. It's the same nonsense Ramses pulled on the people of Egypt when he claimed victory in Kadesh. He knew they couldn't go up there and find out for themselves. So it's all over the temples that he built. You know, my victory in Kadesh. And it was all a big lie. Those Egyptian temples were the ancient Egyptian equivalent of CNN. That's where the government's lies are going to be found. Now, Michael Mann has filed a defamation lawsuit against some people in the media who said, basically the issue is that the Competitive Enterprise Institute policy analyst Rand Simberg described Michael Mann as the Jerry Sandusky of climate science. Now, Michael Mann, of course, is at the heart of the hockey stick fraud. He's been under investigation for misappropriation of research funds. This is not a squeaky clean guy. But I have to agree that that attack and that characterization did cross the line. Now, the court has ruled the defamation lawsuit can proceed. Obviously, Rand Simberg was claiming that he's protected by the First Amendment to say that. But I think it's time to sound a warning to all of my fellow practitioners in the independent media. We are now a significant part of information in this society. And even though corporate media doesn't always play by the rules, we have to. You need to be aware of what legally constitutes slander, libel, or defamation, and you need to be careful, because corporate media and the government would love nothing better for Christmas than an excuse to sue us all out of existence. And so we have to be careful. We have to be more professional than the professional media. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. And Japan, their romance, if you will, with nuclear power has been strained by the Fukushima disaster. And after Fukushima, there was temporarily a ban on all nuclear reactors, and then Japan relented, even though oil prices were dropping because of the oil price war, and they sort of started heading back in. Now they're having second thoughts again. Apparently, they have a reactor called the Monju. It's a fast breeder reactor, meaning the reactor makes more fuel and bomb stuff as it operates. And apparently it has cost nearly 7 billion pounds over the last 22 years. They only started it up a little less than a year ago. It's been running for 250 days, and they've decided to shut it down and scrap it because it's had nothing but problem after problem after problem after problem. And so it would appear that, again, they need to be cautious. And one more time, I want to say that I think all of this stuff can be made to work. Nuclear power, deep oil drilling, even GMO. The problems all come when the safety decisions are left in the hands of the money junkies, who will always cut corners and trade safety for profitability. You look at the cascade for any disaster going all the way back to the initiating event, and you will find something that should have been there, that was planned to be there, and was taken out to save costs. And remember, when the Fukushima quake and tsunami happened, one power station on that coast survived without any damage. That was the one at Onagawa, because the engineer in charge of building that one stood firm. and said, these are the safety specifications that this plant needs, and we're not going to tolerate any cutbacks. And unfortunately, he passed away before seeing the vindication of his obstinance, if you will, stubbornness. But you see, it can be made to work. But unfortunately, as long as the money junkies are calling the shots, we're going to get poor quality reactors, poor quality drilling platforms, poor quality computers, poor quality cars, because money is all they think about. By the way, apparently 700 million Android cell phones are pre-installed with Chinese spyware coming right out of the box. And it all tracks back to a software company called AddUps, and their firmware comes pre-installed on 700 million Android devices, and it's been discovered that it collects personal information from users and sends it back to AddUps without their knowledge or consent. I'm about ready to go back to a couple of Dixie cups and a waxed string for my phone calls to my wife here. Now, Bernie Sanders is demanding now an investigation of big pharmaceutical companies who are making huge profits selling large amounts of highly addictive opioids to rural communities in West Virginia. We talked about this yesterday, where these pharmaceutical executives were arrested for encouraging doctors to get people hooked on these highly addictive synthetic opioids called fentanyls. Got to take a break for station identification. Back with the Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who is joining us in hour number 3 of this, our Christmas show. And what's the first thing you have to talk about?
Well, it's not getting much traction here in the corporate media, but in Myanmar, apparently the army is seizing land owned by various small farmers to create an agro-business conglomerate of these various little plots. And there's one lady who's become kind of a figurehead. Her name is Mau Mau O, and she was listening to state ministers from Aung San Suu Kyi's months-old government, and they tried to convince her that farmers in her village should sign away ownership claims to the lands. These farmers say they were granted the right to cultivate in perpetuity, but was later seized by the military. This gal refused the deal, under which villagers would be allowed some work plots on a portion of the land the army says it doesn't need, and they sweet-talked her for an hour, and she just said no. And so what happened to her was that she was convicted of trespassing and sentenced to a year in jail. Now, I got to say, I had high hopes for Aung San Suu Kyi when she joined the military. But this, coupled with the terrible prosecution of Myanmar's Muslim community, the Rohingyas, I'm getting a bad feeling about this gal. I don't see her as being forceful enough to look at the military and get them to back down. And Mike, as you and I know, the late John F. Kennedy said, when peaceful revolution is impossible, violent revolution is inevitable. And unfortunately, I don't know if she's going to be able to prevent it.
Well, that's always an issue that you have to pay attention to, and you have to be objective in evaluating, you know, if it goes to violence, what that eventual outcome is going to be. So there's unfortunately so much chaos in the world, and we know that it's not arising from ordinary people who are just, well, like these farmers. They're just trying to live their lives, grow some food, take care of their family. The chaos is all generated by the very rich and the very powerful, because out of that chaos they can grab more of the world. It's like they can't take the world as it is, so they're going to basically smash it on the ground and then pick up the pieces, because there's nobody left to stop them from doing that.
It's really unfortunate, and I'm watching this with a great deal of foreboding, because the person I really thought Aung San Suu Kyi was appears not to be the person I'm seeing in action in the government. The next place I'd like to take a look at is Yemen.
Okay.
And as you know, since last spring after the Houthi rebels took over the country, and al-Hadi, who had been the president, kind of had to run out of Dodge real quickly. The Saudi government has been fighting not only the rebels, but they have been killing innocent civilians, children, women, the medically fragile. They've been blowing up schools. They've been blowing up hospitals, etc., etc. And now I think that there is a little bit of movement in both the United States and the UK and suddenly Canada to realize that weapons that have been sold to the Saudi government have been used for these horrific crimes. And I am very angry at President Obama for his consistent aiding and abetting these actions in Yemen. Mm-hmm. And when I posted this article today, and I said to my British brothers and sisters and my Canadian brothers and sisters, with whom I now share something more than a common ancestry, how does it make you feel to know that your government, just as is mine, is complicit in war crimes, guys? This needs a conversation, a very clear, focused conversation with all of our representatives to say, if you continue enabling this, you're not going to get my vote at all. And I'm going to be watching what you're doing on this issue. Well,
I think one of the reasons they've had the push for crooked, riggable elections is so that they could go on out and commit war crimes and atrocities and plunder the people with impunity. And that's why, following Donald Trump's inauguration, I'm going to put a huge, huge focus on building popular support for a demand for an overhaul of that election system. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have a sympathetic ear from the White House because Donald Trump knows that the election fraud in this last election was all working against him, and he's going to be facing that same machine in 4 years' time unless that machine is taken out and replaced with something that's honest and accurate. So now's our opportunity to move on the honest elections, and once we have honest, verifiable elections, then we can, in fact, start to remove from power those whose allegiances are to a foreign government or who are serving the war agenda, who are willing to support torture and war crimes, all these members of Congress who helped create ISIS, and we can start voting them out. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to move forward. I'm going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining us just now. We're in our third hour. The lovely Lady Claire is with us for what is effectively our Christmas show. And what is the next thing you want to talk about? Well, I'd like to go back to the Saudi policy of scorched earth in Yemen. Yes. And say that it reminds me of what was stated by the papal legate, Pierre de Castelnau, when he was involved in his church's persecution of the French Cathars at the siege of Languedoc. And upon hearing that women and children were also with the men who had taken refuge there, what the guy said was, kill them all, God will find his own. Now, I don't know quite how this translates in Arabic, but you catch my drift. Yeah, kill them all, let God sort them out there. And if memory serves me correctly, and first of all, he wasn't the author of that. Pope Innocent III started that idea, kill them all, let God sort them out. But that legate who killed all those people in southern France, 1/3 of the population of southern France during the war against the Cathars, he eventually became Saint Dominic. Yes. Yes, Domingo de Guzman. He became a saint because he killed off 1/3 of the population of southern France. Yeah. And you've got that coupled with the fact that the Saudis are blocking the ports, which is the only way to get food in, and you've got hundreds of thousands of children dying of starvation. And all of these are war crimes under international law. Yeah. And I wish someone at the International Criminal Court had the sand, I don't know if Saudi Arabia is a signatory to this organization, but had the sand to say, okay, we're calling you out for this. Yeah, we definitely need, we need to call out all these countries who committed these war crimes. And as I was saying in the last hour, Tulsi Gabbard is out there saying it's time to stop these illegal wars. Yeah. And we do need some war crimes trials. Yeah. We need to take all these people, send them to The Hague, and put them on trial the way they did the Nazis at the end of World War II, because it looks to me like this push toward World War III has stumbled badly. And when it is well and truly over, yeah, there are war criminals that need to be dealt with. By the way, I just got an email I need to share with you. Claire needs to write a how to diet book. She's really lost a lot of weight and looks fabulous. Good for her. I absolutely agree. You're turning into a hottie on me.
Oh, thank you,
Yes,
sweetheart.
well,
That's very kind.
We've both lost a lot of weight here, and now we're reshaping, and because we're turning into media stars, and we have to look good on camera, and for our product endorsements,
whatever those may be.
Yeah, well, Extendivite.
Yes. I'd like to kind of bop over to Germany right now because there is something that has happened in the aftermath of this horrendous Christmas market shooting. Apparently, right-wing anti-immigrant offensive is escalating. Now, who benefits? Cui bono here. But apparently, people are turning against Angela Merkel just in droves, and in fact have said that there is blood on her hands from her immigration policy.
There absolutely is, and Merkel, of course, has declared for next year's elections, and she's trying to do some maneuvers to make it look like she's dealing with the situation. She's called on German lawmakers to restrict immigration a little bit more, but the damage has already been done. Merkel is trying to put on a show that she's closing the barn door after the horse has well and truly escaped, and I don't think the German people are going to fall for it.
No, and in fact, a gentleman by the name of Markus Pretzel, a leading AfD politician, tweeted immediately after Monday's attack, "The deaths are Merkel's responsibilities." And on Wednesday evening, the AfD, which is just kind of to the right of Attila the Hun organization, created a vigil in front of the Chancellery, and at which far-right organizations such as Pegida, the Identities, and the National Democratic Party plan to take part. I mean, this has absolutely galvanized the German people. And everyone is saying with one voice, we need to adjust and think about our immigration policy because this is not working.
No, it isn't working. It's not working in Germany. It's not working in Europe as a whole. It's not working here in the United States of America. The open borders policy is letting in people who are not a benefit to our society. And again, as I mentioned before, migration is a filtering process. When you go to these countries, whether it's Mexico or Costa Rica or Syria or anybody, the people who are functioning citizens, who have jobs, who've got businesses, they've got homes, they're not going to leave. The people who are leaving are the ones who couldn't make it in their own country. In many cases, they're fleeing prosecution. And so Europe is getting the absolute worst dregs of those host countries coming on in. And so it's no surprise we're seeing all these rapes going on and everything. In fact, apparently they just had another rape in Germany where a Pakistani raped a woman, and his excuse was, it's hard to get a girlfriend when you're a refugee. And we see the same thing here in the United States, where all these MS-13 gang members are just pouring across the border, just ahead of the Mexican police, along with all the contagious diseases that are being brought in. Diseases that had been eradicated in the United States of America are now back infecting the American people, and of course the medical industrial complex is happy. We've got tuberculosis back. We can do fundraising. We can sell medicines. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's a problem, and these people are coming here without skills. They're coming here without language capabilities, and
same thing in Europe. Right now, only 2.3% of the refugees that have gone into Germany have actually been able to find jobs. The rest of them don't have any skills that match the needs of the German economy and society.
Yeah, and so what is going to happen to those people? Are they going to be on permanent welfare? How are they going to be educated to assimilate?
Well, they are putting their children in the school, but as far as welfare, Germany's economy is already near collapse. Europe's economy as a whole cannot support a new welfare class made up of these refugees, and it's going to take them a while to learn the skills to have new jobs. I mean, how much demand are there for camel herders in Europe?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole heck of a lot. I'm sure during Christmas nativity scene, there's probably a few opportunities out there. But
and the other problem that no one wants to address, the big dark, ugly secret. Maybe some of these people came to Europe thinking that they could do manual labor. Manual labor is going to be completely outmoded very soon, or crunched down to the situation where very few people are necessary to get a product out the door from beginning to end.
Well, just look at construction.
Yeah.
Manual labor in Europe means knowing how to drive heavy construction machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a skill that these refugees have not had a chance to acquire in their home countries.
Yeah.
And all of these New World Order globalists, again, classic problem, they don't think it all the way through. Europe's economy can't support this sudden increase in population.
Mm-hmm.
The needs of Europe in terms of jobs are completely out of step with the skill level of the refugees coming on in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not surprising that it's created all kinds of hardship and backlash and anger and violence. And again, the liberals behind the New World Order, they've blown it again. Because as Newt Gingrich said, they're delusional. They're living in a self-created fantasy world where they can just put up a sign or change a law, and what's in people's heads will just switch automatically. And it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And, I feel just a little bad for Merkel, but she's having an industrial strength wake-up call right now.
I don't feel one bit of sympathy for Angela Merkel, especially in her current campaign, to bring back the 1930s German information laws to punish wrong opinions.
That's scary.
We're going to have the thought police going on out. We're going to burn the books.
Yeah, it smacks of,
Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig
Nazi
Heil.
oppression.
Yeah,
It
it's
really
exactly
does.
what it is. It's exactly what it is.
And I wanted to revisit something you mentioned earlier about the alleged truck driver getting shot down in Milan.
Yes.
Mike, I've got to wonder...
And I got to tell you, if you're going to get gunned down in the streets, Milan is a beautiful city to get gunned down.
Ow!
I've been there.
Ow! I have to wonder who gave the order to shoot to kill and from how high up it came. Because if this man had been contained, had been arrested, I wonder who he would have said ultimately sent him.
Well, of course, that's the reason he had to be killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this whole thing smacks of another false flag terror attack between the way they said, he left his residency permit in the truck. I mean...
How convenient.
That's the equivalent of the magic flame-proof, explosion-proof passports that fell out of the airplanes on 9/11.
Yeah.
And then they backtracked on that story and said, okay, we understand you're not buying that one. Well, we just found his fingerprints.
Yeah.
The guy got... And again, he'd been under surveillance. They knew he was a problem. He'd been in prison in Italy for 4 years for arson, and still they let him on in. It does feel like false flag, and we need to be aware there probably is going to be a whole bunch more during this Christmas weekend to try and reignite the war fever in the American people. They had an attempted hijacking earlier today, but the hijackers surrendered and nobody was hurt on the airplane.
That was Morocco, right?
That was Morocco.
Yeah.
And so, it looks like somebody somewhere was saying we need a whole bunch of acts of terror to get this thing going here again. But they've cried wolf so many times, we're not going to listen to them, even if by chance they're actually telling the truth.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because there may be a situation where they may be telling the truth and no one's going to believe them.
Well, see, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Once the people of a nation are convinced the government is lying to them, the government becomes totally impotent and ineffective. They can't do anything because nobody dares trust them ever again.
Yeah. I would like to go over to an area about science and health.
Oh, good.
Pregnant women should avoid beauty products containing what is defined as a gender-bending chemical, BPS, because it can affect mothering instincts of all things. Bisphenol S was designed as a replacement for BPA after mounting concerns about the plastic compound's effects on human health. But scientists now believe that is also an endocrine disruptor, and even low doses of BPS have been found and documented to impair a mother's ability to adjust to a child's needs and behavior and affect the survival chances for her kids. And unfortunately, and I know this because I deal with it because I've got chemical sensitivities from here to eternity, the common compound can be found in deodorant, lipstick, and perfumes. So gals and the gentlemen who love them, when you go out to buy something, please check the label. If it has this stuff in it, don't get it.
Well, part of the problem is, I believe, like BPH, it's used as a liner for containers, as well as being an actual ingredient.
Yeah.
I think at this point, a really effective rule that you should all follow when you're reading those ingredient labels, whether it's a cosmetic or food, if you can't pronounce it, don't put it in your mouth or on your body.
Sounds good to me.
And I think as a good rule of thumb, that's going to keep you out of trouble. Because we live in a country where the government is perfectly okay with all these toxic chemicals being put on your body and down your throat as long as it's making money and paying taxes.
Yeah.
We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we turn the microphone back over to the lovely lady Claire, we are now hearing from Israel, from Benjamin Netanyahu's office, that the United Nations Security Council can take their resolution about the settlements and stick it where the sun don't shine, which I think is a little town outside of...
right. No, that's typical hubristic behavior on his part.
At this point, I want to ask why the United Nations doesn't just kick Israel out, because Israel's membership in the United Nations is the only one that came with conditions.
Yeah.
And the first condition was a Palestinian right of return to their homes and villages that were emptied during Israel's land theft. And the second condition was if the Palestinians of their own free will chose not to return, that Israel would financially compensate them for the loss of their homes and property. Israel has complied with neither one of those conditions. And I think at some point, the United Nations really has to say, we're going to kick Israel out. They're not a real nation anymore. They're not behaving like a real nation. They're not complying with international law. Israel right now holds the all-time record for most United Nations resolutions passed against a single country.
Yeah, I understand that. And, Michael, what is to be done if they will not accept the judgment of the UN? I mean, what can we do now? Because the Palestinians are living under some horrific, awful conditions.
Well, the next step would be sanctions.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, the Security Council could send in peacekeepers. I don't think they'll go there. I think the U.S. will veto that. But the UN Security Council, I mean, now it's a genitalia measuring contest between the Security Council and Israel.
Yep.
I think the Security Council is going to react very forcefully to Netanyahu's braggadocio, just coming on out, and basically saying, we're going to ignore you. You're not important. We're above the laws of man and nation. We're Israel.
Yep.
And I think the Security Council is probably going to say it's time for Israel to have a little dose of humble. Of course, maybe Netanyahu isn't thinking clearly. He's facing his own corruption investigation. But at some point, this arrogance and this presumption of superiority and unshakable sense of entitlement and supremacy has got to come to an end, because it's the cause of so much problems, not just for the Palestinians, but even for the world's Jewish people, who are catching the backflash from Israel's government's crimes. Now, Israel was, in theory, set up to be a homeland for the safety and security of the Jewish people, an independent homeland. Unfortunately, with Israel constantly siphoning money out of other countries, such as the United States, it hardly qualifies as independent. It's behaving as a parasite. The American taxpayer has been forced to give Israel more than 10 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program, for which we have not come up with a giant leap for mankind or even a new version of Velcro. And with Israel's government's actions creating hostility and alienation all around the Middle East and around the world, it can be hardly said that the nation of Israel is in any way, shape, or form protecting the safety and security of the world's Jewish people. And there are a lot of American Jews who are now starting to stand up and say, look, this really is out of control, and I don't want to be associated with them anymore.
There is one brilliant documentary that I would very strongly advise all of our listeners and readers to find. It's out there on the net, and it's called Don't Tell Mother I'm in Iran. Very sharp, very nice-looking Jewish videographer went to Tehran to find out what the situation was with the Jewish people there. And right now, they're thriving. They're doing well. They actually have, as do Christians, a seat in the Majlis, or parliament. And, it's a protected religion, just like Christianity is. And, but for Israel to be screaming about all these other nations and how terribly they're treating specifically their Jewish residents, it's just not true.
Oops, sorry. There's our commercial break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And what is the next thing that you want to talk about?
Apparently, 4 more government officials were just charged for the Flint, Michigan water disaster.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I think the governor ought to be included in that. Of course, he's isolated and protected. Mm-hmm. And especially when you realize when all of this was going down, when the people of Flint, Michigan were getting this lead-contaminated water out of their faucets, and by the way, they're not the only one. 30,000 other cities in the United States of America have even worse levels of lead contamination. But while this was all happening in Flint, Michigan, they had bottled water being brought into the government offices. So the people working in the government didn't have to drink that water.
Yeah, I mean, it was so sick. They knew. And the heck of it is that even though with certain practices like chelation therapy, you can get the lead out of a child's system, but you can't undo the damage it's done to it, to the kid's biology. And if these people get convicted, jail time. That's what I want to see.
And, Flint, Michigan city water coming out of the faucets in their prison cells here.
Yeah.
And there are all these kids that are running around with this permanent brain damage,
yep.
Which I guess we have to find future congressmen somewhere.
Ow. Ouch, ouch, ouch. But, you have to feel for these people to imagine that local and state and government officials were not taking care of water, which is essential to life. It just boggles the mind.
And meanwhile, Nestle is buying up all the fresh, safe water supplies in the entire country to commoditize it. And their corporate attitude is, no, you don't have a natural right to fresh, clean drinking water. And when you look at all the states that have actually made it illegal to catch rainwater on your own property, again, it's that enforced dependency. You will go to a corporation for your water. You will go to a corporation for your food. You will go to a corporation for your medicine. You will go to a corporation for everything that you need. You're not allowed to provide for yourself. You're not allowed to grow it, collect it, or find it anywhere. You will be dependent. And, of course, enforced dependency is a system of enslavement. Now, the other aspect of this is that all these parents in Flint, Michigan, and these other 30,000 other communities, these parents have to be all of a sudden realizing the medical problems their children are suffering were allowed to happen by the government. And this is an issue that spreads beyond the water into other issues such as toxins in food and vaccinations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The right of the government, if you will, to poison us.
For profit.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, going on back to this story we reported earlier in the week where 6 pharmaceutical executives have been arrested for going on out and incentivizing doctors to overprescribe this highly addictive synthetic opiate called fentanyl in order to get patients hooked on it and make them dependent for life. Tell me what is different between these pharmaceutical executives and the drug pilots flying over the border with their opium from Afghanistan. There really doesn't seem to be any. And yet, the medical establishment is just fully on board with this right now.
When it comes to your health, and this is something that's very important to remember, knowledge is power. There are things that I take in terms of nutritional supplements. I've done the due diligence, I've done the research, and I understand why I'm taking them. And I think that our audience out there, especially if you're in our target demographic, aka just
Both
a little bit older.
Both of you.
You need to really start researching this stuff. For example, things like Manuka honey, which is carried at decent health food stores.
Or
now,
alkaline water.
Alkaline water.
Okay.
Again, there are things you can do to help yourself stay well in your choices of food and your choices of water. That issue of acid-alkaline balance. And I mean, we've known, the scientific community has known since the 30s, that is really the basis on which health can either get better or get worse, because in a slightly alkaline human body, disease it's not going to show up. It's not going to go there.
And unfortunately, most processed food sold in restaurants and supermarkets is highly acidic and leads to problems for which the doctors won't tell you avoid acidic foods and beverages. They'll just say, here's a pill, here's a cream, here's an ointment, here's something else. It's just more about selling the product.
Yeah.
Another area is, and again responding to this listener who wrote in about how svelte Claire is starting to look here. One of the major components of our weight loss is avoiding food additives which make you eat more. And we reported earlier in the week where they're finally coming on out and admitting that artificial sweeteners are not a diet aid. They make you crave more carbohydrates. We avoid MSG. Because MSG, which is sold as a flavor enhancer, interferes with the brain signal saying, I've had enough to eat.
Yep.
And food manufacturers love it. They load up their food with it. They know people are trying to avoid it, so they have about 30 or 40 different euphemistic names they're allowed to use for it, like hydrolyzed soy protein and yeast extract. And all of it comes down to this chemical that makes your brain unable to determine you've had enough to eat. So you keep eating, you gain weight, and then you eat up the food more quickly, which means you go back to the market, you buy more food, they make more money. And if you avoid those, you're going to start losing weight. It really is kind of sick in a world that has so much famine already. American food companies and European food companies are literally, deliberately adding chemicals to the food to make you eat and buy more. People are always talking about America's obesity epidemic, and here we've got exercise machines to sell you, and we'll fix all of that. And the reality is that our food is dosed with chemicals to make us eat more, and that is the cause of America's obesity epidemic. And so if you make a point of learning all those names for MSG and avoiding foods that have that, do more home cooking, avoid the processed foods, avoid aspartame and other artificial sweeteners, and you're going to all of a sudden discover you're losing weight because you're not getting those chemicals that trick your body into wanting to eat more.
Right, right. And we were talking about acid-alkaline balance. Well, how do you know what it is? There are certain strips that you, again, can find in your health food store.
There we are.
Litmus strips.
For those of you on BAM user, we're showing what these look like.
And you put it under your tongue for a minute. It will turn a color. And on the back of the box, it will show you what your level of acid-alkaline balance is, so that you know where you are and you know what you need to do to correct it if it's a little bit too acidic.
And you do need to be careful. You can go overboard being alkaline as acid.
Yep.
And extremes in both direction are wrong, but you want to be slightly alkaline, and you will avoid all kinds of situations. We have a caller waiting on the line, Mateus up in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Merry Christmas. What's on your mind?
Ho, ho, ho. How's my serious-looking elf and his faithful helper today?
Yes.
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 It's funny seeing you look all serious and down to business in this ridiculous outfit.
I actually got a lot of emails from people saying how much they thought it was funny, especially the bah humbug that's embroidered across the top of the Santa hat. The reason I'm looking so serious, of course, is the very, very tragic news we had about John in Barbados, which kind of brought us all down. But, I'm trying to festive up for the holiday season.
He didn't hear it.
So he's still in a coma? That's the last I heard.
No, he passed. He passed away about
Oh, I can't believe it.
4 hours ago. Yeah.
And our hearts
That's
go
crazy.
out. Our hearts go out to his family.
I can't believe that. He was just sounding fine a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it is amazing. Well, I mean, that's a merciful thing that it was that quick and wasn't a long, lingering, drawn-out, very painful deterioration. I got an email from somebody else who was talking about her father, who's been dealing with cancer of the brain for years, multiple operations, doesn't know who he is or recognize anybody anymore. And, if we all ultimately are going to have to die, and we'd obviously prefer to die more quickly, instantaneously, than something drawn out and painful. My personal ambition is to live to be 101 and then be shot by a jealous husband.
Hey, where
you didn't hear that, Claire.
No, I heard it loud and clear.
I'm
Where
sorry.
did John Barbados get his information? Do you know? He seemed to have some sort of bit of an inside line on sometimes.
We understood that he had some inside sources. We didn't ask too many prying questions about it. But the show has actually quite a few supporters who are, and I'm not saying this is what John was, but we have some supporters who are retired intelligence people who are feeling very regretful for what they did during their careers, and they're trying to make amends by either financially supporting us or just encouraging us along or just being our friends and saying, you're on the right track and we support what you're trying to do.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that about John.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a Christmas bummer.
Yes, it is.
Definitely. But I think it makes
Hey, I wanted to call to wish you guys Merry Christmas. I haven't called in a while, but I've been listening every day. And I wanted to mention that it may be that the side that is working against us may not be as strong as they would like us to think. Like, for example, this whole Hillary, she just kind of collapsed.
Yes.
And Trump was not assassinated because now it would have been the time to do it by now. It's kind of almost too late to do it now.
Well, certainly from Hillary's point of view, the opportunity is gone. They would have had to try and do it before the Electoral College. And there were 3 attempts. They weren't reported very well, but there were 3 attempts. Now that the Electoral College has certified Trump, Hillary has no path to the White House. Right now, her big concern is avoiding prosecution for her crimes, and I think that's the reason the Hillaryites are still attacking my server, because they're specifically targeting the files related to all of the Clinton scandals, the dead bodies list, the possibility that she was committing espionage using that private email server. They're trying to DOS those to make them unavailable to people, and that's kind of a giveaway. So I think the fact that Huma Abedin and Hillary had a 5-hour meeting in Hillary's New York office, I don't think they were trading Christmas recipes during all that time. I think there's a tremendous concern that what was on Anthony Weiner's laptop is very serious, going beyond State Department emails, going into the creation of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and some other stuff that's even darker, according to some unsourced yet unconfirmed reports, which we're not going to go into here.
Right. Well, the good news is that the other side, I don't think they're as strong as we thought. And so that's kind of a good news. And just one thing, kind of Christmas related, regarding the 3 wise men, they're kind of depicted as astronomers. But I'd like to present an alternative theory that I believe personally that they were more astrologers than astronomers.
Well, back in that time, they were the same thing. Back in that time, they were the same thing. Astronomy as a science came out of the religion of astrology, just as modern chemistry came out of more of the religion of alchemy. And the 3 wise men, the Magi, were priests of the religion of Zoroastrianism. Now, they're portrayed as kings, but they were actually priests of the cult of Zoroaster, or Zarathustra. And the reason they were wandering around the Mideast is there had been a crisis in Persia where the church had collapsed. It had been exposed for committing tricks and frauds on the worshipers, and there was literally a war of the magicians, and they were all expelled. And that's why these three were wandering around Judea trying to set up shop again.
Well, you see, I want some judgmental Christians to listen to this, because I suffered a lot because my mother was an astrologer and born into a rigid Catholic born-again Christian family, and they condemned her to hell because she was an astronomer.
That's
an astrologer.
Yeah.
And so I grew up without a family, just my single mother and me, because of this. And
that had to be tough.
I want to make the point that astronomers were good enough to find baby Jesus, but now if my mother is an astronomer, she goes to hell. I just want to point out the hypocrisy, and Jesus wasn't judgmental like that.
No. Joshua wasn't judgmental.
Yeah, and Mateus, let me share something of my own experience. I'm a Christian. I've mentioned that on my posts on the blog. And to me, what this is about is love, non-judgment, and being kind, making a difference where you can. That is how I understand Christianity. And I love it that my faith community is cooperating with, in fact, a Catholic faith community that's, I think, very liberal in terms of providing food for the homeless here on Oahu. No one yells about dogma or this is wrong or that is wrong. It's just people coming together in a loving way. And that's sort of where I come from on my faith.
I've said it before. Good people are going to do good things. Bad people are going to do bad things, and both often cite religion as their justification. And so it really comes down to the individual people and how they are. The vast majority of the human race can live together in peace and help each other out. It's just we have these few troublemakers who seek positions of power, influence, and authority, and they just want to stir things up to make themselves seem more important or have more control. And it is a curse within religion, within politics, within education, and we need to basically start seeing that we have to judge the quality of people by how they behave, not by what religion they follow, not by what political party they're a member of. We need to take them on a case-by-case basis, one at a time. This is a good person, that's a bad person.
The content of their character.
The content of their character.
Dr. Martin Luther King said.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I hope that you're planning.
That's right, and finally, just to leave it on the last note here, and so the reason, just for clarification, the reason that Jesus was born in the stables was because there was no room in the inn because it was Christmas, right?
Well, it raises it raises the question here. I mean, how does Jesus celebrate his birthday? Everything's closed. All right, we got to let you go and take a break.
Merry Christmas,
okay. Merry Christmas.
Take care.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, the music on that last bump was created by my lovely wife, Claire, as part of her album, Christmas Without Borders. We're going to take one more phone call here from Fran in Washington. Fran, welcome. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Aloha nui nui.
Aloha nui nui melikalikimaka.
What's on your mind?
Oh,
wow. I'm impressed.
Yes, I am,
what
too.
What did I do?
You did
wonderfully.
Great.
What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted, how often do I get to put that phrase together? And bless both of your hearts, and Merry Christmas in English.
Thank
and
you.
Yes, we're all mourning John.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was.
And I'll call you next week.
All right, sounds really good. Thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. No more phone calls. We're at the end of the show here, our Christmas show. And again, a reminder, a Monday show will be a replay because RBN is giving their overworked and drastically underpaid staff the day off. We are going to take one more phone call, I guess, was waiting. Tony in Hermosa, what's on your mind? Tony, are you there?
Hey,
there you are.
Yeah. I just been listening for 5 years. Just wanted to call and give you a quick imaginary friend in the chimney. Marry one.
That's very kind. Thank you so much.
Do we have a chimney?
Virtual.
Oh, okay.
We have a virtual chimney.
We have a virtual chimney here. Yeah, let me share something with you. Let me share something. When I was a kid growing up, and the tradition was everybody would meet at whoever had the largest house, and they'd show up a couple of days before, sleep over Christmas night, and then Christmas morning open the presents. And when it was my grandparents' house, my grandfather would do this. He would hide all the Christmas presents Christmas Eve and go out about 4 in the morning and let off a shotgun. And the kids would get up, there's nothing under the tree, and Grandpa would say, oh, well, that's who I thought was trying to break into the house. And the kids would fall for it every year and just cry their eyes out.
Your poor cousins. That's so sad.
Wish I could do that here.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else?
No, I've just been listening for 5 years, and just wanted to thank you for everything. Yeah, I've never called in before, but I just wanted to wish you two the best and have a great
thank
weekend.
you so much. We
All
appreciate
right.
that.
I do. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
We're going to let you go here. We're down to the last couple of minutes of the show. So Claire and I want to send out to everybody listening to our program, watching on BAM User, have a very Merry Christmas. Have a very safe Christmas. Also, Happy Hanukkah, because they line up this year.
Yeah.
And so our best wishes for everybody. I think 2017 is going to be an amazingly wonderful year of transformation for the better for everybody. And maybe we can go back to a world where we really do sit around holding hands at the campfire and singing Kumbaya without all these sociopaths trying to stir up trouble for the sake of a fast buck.
Amen to that,
definitely to that. And do try and put down this twisted, perverted image of Christmas as marketing going into the store, and really do try to get back to the spirit of peace on earth, goodwill toward all men, of goodwill, and women
all
as well.
Humankind.
All right, there's the music. Time for us to get on out of here. We're on Christmas vacation until church tomorrow night. So we'll be back on Tuesday. Have a good weekend. Have a good Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, and Aloha America.